He runs the European office for Flurry. I don't think Flurry needs much of an introduction, but it's the leading free mobile analytics platform, and they have a bunch of other products around that. He can tell us a little bit more about this.
Cool, thanks. What I'm going to do is leverage Flurry's insight into a bewildering number of apps these days to really show you, additionally, hopefully, on an incremental insight from what you've seen this morning from the likes of Appnation, because we have such a unique view of the world. Actually, this slide was produced in November, and it's amazing how fast this stuff moves. So we see about 4.8 billion app sessions a day, and we see monthly actives of about 1.3 billion. And for those of you that are thinking about how many active smart devices there are in the world, you might say, wait a minute, that's about all of them. And it is about all of them, because our Flurry Analytics is a free service. It was the first, it's the most penetrated, and it's the world's largest. And we track for 485,000 apps and about 130,000 companies. One of the reasons why you don't see a Flurry stand here is that we'd be inundated with people saying, hey, I've implemented Flurry on analytics and I can't quite get the events or the segments working properly. And we'd just be inundated. We'd literally have to have a team of 30 or 40 to deal with it. So the research that I have for you today is more actual insight than research. It's looking at actual data from inside apps on live devices all the way around the world. So it's not panel-based. We don't do a sample of 10 or 15,000 and extrapolate that to the worldwide usage population. So I mentioned that we track about 1.3, or we see about 1.3 billion active devices. So we're the world's most penetrated piece of software in devices. So almost every single one of you will have our software in your device, and almost every device that we see in the world has Flurry software in it. And we track for Angry Birds, we track for Fruit Ninja, for Snapchat, for Tumblr, for Pinterest, for Zepsolab and Cut the Rope, for Talking Tom, for Skype, for Shazam, for The Guardian, for The Economist. The list goes on and on. So you can begin to see that as you get a new device and you start downloading apps, it's really difficult to avoid this, actually. And we see a huge number of events. An event you can track within Flurry, which is any completed action inside your game or inside your app. That might be completing a level, that might be making an in-app purchase, that might be sharing on Facebook, that might be visiting the leaderboard. Any one of those completed actions you can record within Flurry as an event. And we now see about 1.3 trillion events a month. And you can see that up and to the right shows phenomenal growth in the number of events that we see. And each one of these sort of steps, the blue boxes, has triggered an increased acceleration in the number of events that Flurry sees. Pepe did sort of indicate that we're more than just an analytics company, and I still, after 3 years, and Flurry's been trading for 5 years in the advertising business, we are very much looking to leverage all of that data for the benefit of publishers with ads inside that are more effective, because we know more about your users not only when they're inside your app, but when they're off your app. And we can take that data and make it bear relevance to advertisers, not only other games developers, but we think more crucially to brand advertisers. Often talk about games developers saying, yeah, I do want to monetize with advertising, but I don't want my competitors in my own app. I've spent hard-earned effort, design, production, cash, getting my users. Why do I want them for relatively cheaply to go to a competitor because I've shown an ad from a competitor? So actually bringing that data to bear for the likes of companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever and Coca-Cola and McDonald's, and bringing those advertisers into the mobile ecosystem is what we're about. So we have AppCircle, which is our mobile traffic acquisition network. It's primarily a video network, so we compete with the likes of AdConnolly. AppSpot's our trading platform. We've just recently launched a programmatic exchange, so you can buy by bidding on impression by impression. And of course, we have our analytics business, which I referred to earlier. So just a little bit about Flurry, that we're more than just an analytics business. So one of the things that we're looking at is truly almost a yet another mobile content explosion in the number of app starts that we see on Flurry. Typically, Flurry will be engaged with a developer a couple of months before the app goes out into the store. And so this is a measure of all the new app starts we see on a monthly basis. And actually, guys and girls, it's getting faster and faster and faster. And we're seeing nearly twice as many new app starts on a quarterly basis than we did 18 months ago. So we're really nowhere near maturation on app starts. You guys and developers around the world are just getting busier and busier and busier at producing apps. And therefore, from a consumer perspective, there's just more and more and more choice. I think we all agree there's well over 1 million unique pieces of content and apps in the world to choose from. So there's more choice than ever before. It's a phenomenal new content explosion that we're seeing at Flurry. We often get asked about, how well are developers doing at securing large-scale audiences. And this is a measure of all the apps that we see that have secured and have well over 20 million monthly active users. And you can see that number's relatively small. I mentioned that we track 485,000 apps. So suddenly we were talking about what was 7 apps that had at least 20 million active users 18 months ago to now 32. So out of 485,000, there are 32 that have properly scaled at over 20 million MAU. But actually, that is a whopping 360% growth in that 18 months. So whilst Facebook is generally acknowledged to be dominating usage, and I think Sheryl Sandberg claimed in a quarterly earnings the end of last year, they have about 26% share of all usage on mobile, and that is probably true. What it does show is there's still an awful lot of white space for everyone in this room and everyone that's working hard to build mobile games and mobile apps. You then look at those that are generating over at least 1 million monthly actives. And again, that number's grown from 400 to 875. So again, there's nearly 1,000 apps that are generating at least 1 million monthly actives. And of course, it takes no explanation that active usage is where the monetization can and only begin, and at scale. And I've got some slides on the freemium versus premium as well. So there is a real sense that the number of apps that are being generated and the number of apps that are generating large-scale audiences is definitely on the rise and on the very, very fast rise. And there's an awful lot of content that consumers seem to want like never before. They seem to be hungrier and hungrier and hungrier for app consumption. And the other good news is that the international markets are really killing it. For the first time last year, we saw more apps produced outside the US than inside the US. Often there's a misconception that the vast majority of apps are produced in North America. And for last year, for the first year, and we think it will be forevermore this true, that there are more apps now being produced internationally than anywhere else. So congrats everyone in this room. That's why I love being in Europe, and Europe's particularly strong at all of this, and we can see lots of great usage out there. So I thought I'd just have a couple of slices of what happened 6 weeks or 8 weeks ago at Christmas. It is only a couple of months since it was Christmas. It does feel like a long time ago. And which of the devices really win the gifting war? And for us, it was very clear that Amazon did. And Amazon generated more uplift compared to the average of the 3 weeks before Christmas than any other device. And it has obviously a number of advantages, not least which is we can't go to Amazon without them advertising their Kindle on each and every one of our home pages. I think that's been the case for about two and a half years. I think we're all pretty fed up with that takeover at the top of our home pages on Amazon. So they have an advantage of a significant distribution channel that's free for them. But we think they've also got some other significant things right. And to underestimate Amazon and Bezos, he tends to, whatever he does, he tends to do well. I am an ex-Amazon employee, but and I think their apps I think will follow suit. I think they're good at selling stuff, price, convenience, choice. I think, are the three tenets of the Amazon business. But I think for the Kindle, they've got definitely some, I think the price point made it affordable for most. I think the business model where the Kindle is pretty much a platform for you to download their content, so they sell you the device at cost. The target audience, I think, is wealthier, middle class, they can afford these devices. And I think the form factor, I think it's a pretty decent piece of kit. Although, to be fair, lots of people say, but I don't see anyone using a Kindle Fire. But definitely we see that what happened at Christmas was that Amazon won the gifting war. And tablets are far more predominant gifting. Smartphones generally aren't gifted these days. So this chart shows that actually when you're talking about gifting tablets, and again this is measuring the average of the 3 weeks of December against Christmas, you can see that the Wi-Fi tablet was the gift item of choice. That again is probably because it's affordable, because the Wi-Fi non-cellular enabled tablet is cheaper. But also it means that it's straight out of the box plug and play. Whereas if you think about a cellular enabled tablet, you've got to then set up your contract. So it's a bit like giving a toy to a child, but the batteries are not included. So we definitely saw that Wi-Fi was the most gifted device. It's affordable, straight out of the box, and it's the least expensive. But we are seeing a slowdown. You know, my 3 years at Flurry, you know, actually the frenetic nature of what happens before Christmas has definitely slowed as well. And so this is looking at the number of app downloads year on year, 11 to 12, 12 to 13. And you can see that the number of downloads in December actually grew 90% year on year from 11 to 12, but only at 11% for 13 over 12. So, and what's that about? Well, certainly the connected device is just much more commonplace. It's just much more part of our lives than it has been before. And that there are far less shiny new devices each Christmas that will generate a huge surge in downloads. So we're definitely seeing that. And it signals a market maturation when it comes to Christmas being the time that everyone gets a new device. And certainly it would be fair to say in the early adopting markets like US and Europe and Asia, where there's already a penetration of at least one smartphone and one tablet, actually you can think then, well, you know, there's no real cause for lots of new downloads because there's no major surge in new devices. So you can see that definitely we're seeing signs of a mature market. It kind of means that your December can be a little calmer in the rush to because there's not so much at stake. Don't get me wrong, we still see, you know, 1.5 billion, well plus downloads in Christmas week. So it's still a phenomenally intense period and there's lots at stake, but less so than there has been previously. And then, and then what happens over Christmas with devices is also changing. And what this looks at is the uplift against category for the Christmas period. And it's kind of a bit like about what happens at weekends. At Christmas we can relax and we start to download apps because we've got more time and we're not working. And that kind of happens at the weekend as well. And indeed for advertising and burst activity, we often see campaigns starting Thursday night and Friday and then pausing again on Monday, really to capture that download opportunity over the weekend. But we definitely saw that games and social were the two big categories when it comes to the uplift over Christmas. And other categories like media and lifestyle, so photo, video, music, there are often big surges in those markets over Christmas too. So anyone know Benedict Evans? He was famous. He's a famous analyst. I've been lucky enough to meet him a couple of times. Bewilderingly smart guy. He wrote this piece called Mobile Eating the World. And we just can't help but agree that that's continuing. And this is a look at all the categories by compound annual growth of sessions year on year. And the whole app economy, according to what Flurry sees, which is about half of all the apps in the world, we saw an average of 115% growth. But obviously some are growing at much faster rate, like utilities and productivity are just growing they grew at 150%, which is probably a significant sign that these devices just become an embodiment of everything that we do every day. You know, there's definitely advances in those productivity apps that certainly I use, like Expensify, phenomenally good expense app, by the way. Takes away all the effort of expenses. Little photo, uploads to the server, your report's done. Expensify, I love it. Evernote, you know, I threw away my notepad. I'm in my late 40s, so I held onto my notepad for a long, I'm talking about my physical notepad with a pen, until about 10 months ago, and now Evernote's just taken over, and it syncs with both your tablet and your smartphone. So I think utility and productivity has definitely grown. But even games, you know, we feared that games might have reached maturity, and hopefully this is interesting to you to see how the games market's comparing to others. Even with the games market, we're still seeing, you know, just under 70% compound annual growth of sessions year on year, which still shows that, you know, again, indicative of the fact that there's just so much more out there, you know, and consumers seem to be showing no slowdown in their appetite to play games and social games. You know, and we know that mobile's kind of redefined who's a gamer, you know, and Candy Crush and Heyday and Clash of Clans and, you know, all of these have really proven that you know, we're all gamers, and that's phenomenally exciting. But and we can see that growth is still very much set to continue. I often get asked, and by the way, Flurry really does only look at apps. We don't track the web, but we've done lots of research into how does the time we spend inside app compare to the web? And if you're thinking of building sort of HTML5 and web-based products, actually we're seeing the percent of time per day inside native apps relative to the mobile web is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just a shade under 90% of the time every day that consumers spend accessing content is via a native app. And we don't think that trend's going to decline. We think that it's squeezing. Now, often after this, someone comes up to me and says, yeah, but Rich, is that really true? I spend a lot of time on the web. But what you'll probably then experience is that your dwell time inside mobile web is very short. You're doing it for quick, urgent needs, you know, like a flight checker to make sure that your flight's on time, or a quick weather check. Hey, Chris, how are you, man? So again, you know, the amount of time we spend inside applications is about 90% on native app. So I did say I would talk about sort of, you know, freemium versus premium, and I know this has been debated at length, but this is pretty compelling. You can see for the previous 3 years compared to last year, the amount of apps that were free rocked about sort of 80 to 85%, but now it's suddenly shifted to 90%. And we definitely see that consumers want free content more than they want to avoid ads. And we're all probably under the theory that consumers hate advertising. Probably true. But like the radio market and the TV market and even the online market, which have been freemium for decades, think about our favorite radio stations and even our favorite newspaper, heavily discounted on the price because it's got a whole bunch of ads in there from cover to cover. Same with our magazines, same with all of our websites. None of them would be here without funding from advertising. So certainly am I taking a question halfway through? Can you wait to the end? Otherwise, I've only got 20 minutes. Let's wait to the end. So then the consumer is clearly making a trade-off between the direct payment of the app, let's call it 99 cents, and the indirect, implicit payment via watching ads. And they're definitely voting absolutely clearly. That doesn't mean that all freemium apps have ads in them. But by and large, I think consumers know that if they don't want ads, absolutely, then they'll pay for the premium version because that's usually ad-free. So definitely seeing that, you know, consumers are making a trade-off, but overwhelmingly they're voting to download apps for free. And again, we don't see that trend ever subsiding. And we sort of look at, you know, app usage. This is morning to night, you know, and I bumped into a developer yesterday, and I said I would use this phrase today, so I don't want to disappoint him. Sort of, app time is all the time, and it does have an evening peak, typical and reflective of television. but we see, you know, highly sustained usage from 6:37 in the morning right the way through to 11, 12 at night. And obviously, smartphone gives way to the tablet in the evening. But we're also seeing a significant shift in TV consumption. I saw a UK Gov report the other day that the amount of time that teenagers spend on TV on their tablets has grown from 5 to 33%. And so people often say, where's the mobile TV? Well, the mobile TV is already here for the good chunk of our teenagers, which is it's the tablet. And why would you watch TV with your parents when you can watch it in your bedroom? It's a bit of a no-brainer, you know. And we know that linear television is still, by and large, shared through one device in the living room. But the teenagers are indicative of a massive revolution in how we're consuming TV. And I think as that generation grows up, we'll see that for the most part, most of us will watch television on tablets. And we can probably all reflect that we're doing so already. And in fact, I've seen a lot of app developers acknowledging that by putting ads on TV. You know, we often talk about user acquisition in mobile, but there's a phenomenal trend for successful user acquisition on TV as well. I've seen Candy Crush a lot on television in the UK. So a few more. How am I doing on time? Have I got? Am I on time? I've lost track, but I'll keep going. We're looking at global adoption and what that looks like from sessions. So over 30 countries are growing at over 200%. Africa, Middle East, and parts of LATAM are just growing at an insane rate. The US and Europe, as I mentioned previously, is the most mature. And China's clearly, you know, the world's biggest market by active penetration. We reported around this time last year that China overtook the US with about 300 million actives. We think that's now about 350 million actives. So China will remain, by default of its population, around 1.2, the largest market for active usage in the world forevermore. But also where the apps are generated and the consumers that are consuming those apps is what this slide's looking at. I'll just point you to two examples. In the UK, only 13% of the apps that we consume in the UK actually were built in the UK. But if you contrast that with China, I'm not saying that getting into China is in any way easy, but of all the time spent in China, 64% of apps were built in China. So if we think about that opportunity to actually bring foreign apps into China, but obviously you've got to think about the cultural fit, language, and everything else, you can see that there's a complete out of sync with the rest of the world. For most part, the US, Europe, spend a lot of time playing a lot of games, a lot of apps that are built everywhere. But in China, you know, nearly 7 out of 10 apps are actually built by the Chinese. So big opportunity there. Reminder, I just said it's the world's biggest market. I'm not saying it's easy. That's it. So I'm under time. So thanks very much. Cheers. Now that I am under time, I think you were keen to challenge me on my freemium versus premium statements.
There's more free apps now, but do you also look for breakdown per type of app? Games, basically. I can see that productivity apps are more paid.
Yeah, fair question. We almost definitely have access to that data, but the data's, we do have, I think, just under 4,000 servers, and that's a poor imitation of one. If you give me your card, I can probably go look for that data. The other way that we do look at it is by top 1,000 grossing, and we think of the top 1,000 grossing, 90% are freemium. So there's only 10% of those in the top 1,000 that are actually premium. So we think it's across the board, and for those making the most amount of money. But it probably will vary according to sector. So that's a good question, but I don't have access to that information. Yes.
Thank you.
So, out of the top 1,000 grossing, I know you were going to talk about the life cycle of a mobile game, but I'm just curious if you have off the top of your head, what is the life cycle of those top 1,000 grossing? Is it 2 months, a year?
Right. For those that have seen me present before, there is a really depressing number on retention, which I think is one way of answering the question, which is, on average, after 30 days, apps retain 20-odd% of their audience, and after 12 months, it's 4%. So within a year of launch, nearly everyone loses nearly everyone, nearly all of the time. By the way, For those of you frustrated that we only ever had a rolling retention metric and not an absolute day one retention, we've actually changed that last week. It's in globally available beta. So if you go in, you'll see a new feature in analytics for Flurry, which actually measures true retention, not rolling retention, which we're really pleased about because everyone's been asking for it for like 5 years.
Richard, you've got to come back to talk about lifetime. You see
I know,
that, right?
I know.
Any other
I know.
questions?
I will, I promise.
Any other questions? We still have 2 or 3 minutes. I actually have one in the meantime.
Sure.
You've talked about the uplift during December or Christmas. Have you guys detected any other seasons on the calendar where we can see a big uplift? Like, I mean, I know it might be regional, right? But I mean, have you guys seen like Thanksgiving in the US, Halloween, or?
Yeah, so Halloween and Thanksgiving are 2 huge seasons in the US, which are not reflected anywhere else in the world. In fact, Thanksgiving, I think Europe, by and large, ignores. So we definitely see 2 peaks there. Actually, this week in Valentine's, you know, there's if you think about things like flower and gifting apps, there's also a lot of games based around the Valentine's season. I know Magic Solver are doing an awful lot around that. And actually, I think there's a lot of tax activity in January as well. So we often talk about January is about tax and February is about flowers. And romance, so this is the better month of the 2. So I would say those are the 2 or 3 that come top of my head, definitely. And obviously Christmas, which is enormous.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you.